In 1974, the federal government told Americans to stop collecting rainwater. It said it disrupted the water cycle. It said it was dangerous. It said it belonged to the state. Your grandfather kept doing it anyway, filling those galvanized tanks behind the barn just like his father did before him. And here is the part nobody talks about. Scientists now say decentralized rainwater collection actually reduces flooding and groundwater depletion. The government got it exactly backwards. Number 7 on this list was classified as a public health hazard in 1968. Today, the CDC quietly acknowledges the method is more effective than what replaced it. Number 14 was banned outright in 3 states. The lobbying group that pushed that ban was funded entirely by utility companies who stood to lose millions. These 25 tricks weren't abandoned because they stopped working. They were abandoned because somebody got rich when you forgot them. Your grandparents built lives, raised families, and survived disasters using knowledge that took centuries to develop. Then, a generation of regulations, corporate advertising, and suburban zoning wiped it out in 30 years. Before we start, hit subscribe. What you are about to learn is not survival fantasy. It is American history. Let us count down. Number 25, rainwater harvesting with barrel diverters. Before municipal water bills existed, your great-grandfather built a network of wooden gutters and clay jugs that caught every drop that fell on the farmhouse roof. A single inch of rain on a 1,000 square foot roof delivers over 600 gallons. He knew this the way he knew the angle of the sun. A good summer filled cisterns that lasted through September. The trick was the first flush diverter, a simple pipe that let the first dirty runoff bypass the tank before clean water flowed in. He built his from bent tin. You can build yours from $2 worth of PVC. Colorado, Utah, and several other states technically restricted or banned this practice for decades, citing water rights law. But in 2016, Colorado quietly legalized it up to 110 gallons. Utah followed. The restrictions are crumbling because the method works and always worked. A household that harvests rain for garden irrigation reduces outdoor water use by 40%. Your grandfather did not need a study to tell him that. He had a dry August and a full tank. Number 24, the root cellar pantry. No electricity, no refrigeration costs. Consistent 35 to 40 degrees year-round just by digging 8 feet into a hillside. Your grandmother stored carrots, turnips, potatoes, apples, and canned goods in a hand-dug cellar that kept food stable from October to May without a single kilowatt. The trick was humidity management. Pack root vegetables in damp sand. Hang dried herbs from the ceiling joists. Keep apples away from everything else because they off-gas ethylene and ripen your other produce too fast. She knew this. Every farm wife knew this. A properly built root cellar maintains produce for 6 to 8 months with zero running cost. Modern building codes in many counties now require permits for any underground structure, even one you dig by hand on your own property. The permit process can cost more than the cellar itself. Your grandparents never asked permission to store their own food. Number 23, open pollinated seed saving. Every fall, your grandfather walked the garden with a paper bag and collected seeds, tomatoes, beans, squash, corn. He spread them on newspaper, let them dry for 2 weeks, then stored them in labeled envelopes in a cool, dry place. The next spring, those seeds grew, and they grew true, identical to the parent plant, because they were open-pollinated varieties bred over generations. By 1970, seed companies had begun quietly replacing open-pollinated varieties with F1 hybrids that produce sterile second-generation seeds. By 1990, small regional seed companies were being bought out at a rate of dozens per year. Today, a handful of corporations control over 60% of the global commercial seed supply. Planting patented GMO seeds and saving them for replanting is technically a federal offense. Your grandfather never needed a license to grow food from his own harvest. Seed libraries now exist in all 50 states, specifically to preserve this knowledge. Use them. Number 22. Backyard animal slaughter. In 1952, if your family raised hogs, you slaughtered them yourself in November when the weather turned cold. A 250-pound pig yielded hams, bacon, sausage, lard, cracklings, head cheese, and blood pudding. The whole neighborhood came. Everybody worked. Nobody wasted a single thing. Municipal ordinances began banning backyard slaughter in the 1960s and 70s, ostensibly for sanitation. But inspectors rarely showed up at commercial slaughterhouses, where conditions were genuinely horrifying. The laws targeted small producers who were direct competition to industrial meat packers. The technique your grandfather used, a single well-placed shot or a captive bolt followed by immediate exsanguination, is actually the most humane and sanitary method available. More than a dozen states still explicitly permit small-scale personal use slaughter. Check your local ordinances. The knowledge is worth preserving. Number 21. Lard as the only cooking fat you need. First pattern break. When Crisco launched in 1911, Procter & Gamble spent what would today equal millions of dollars convincing Americans that their hydrogenated cottonseed oil was cleaner, safer, and more modern than lard. They hired home economists. They published cookbooks. They donated to churches. They did not tell you that hydrogenation produces trans fats. The FDA finally banned trans fats entirely in 2018 after decades of evidence linking them to heart disease. Your grandmother rendered her own lard from pig fat in a heavy pot on the back of the wood stove. She strained it into crocks, and it kept for months at room temperature. Lard from pasture-raised pigs contains significant vitamin D. Its smoke point is higher than olive oil. Its flavor is incomparable for biscuits, pie crust, and fried chicken. We threw away the good fat to buy the dangerous one, and the industry that sold us the dangerous one funded the research that told us lard was the problem. Some of the most respected food scientists in the country are now saying your grandmother was right. Gray water is the name for the water that goes down your sink after washing dishes. It holds a little soap and some food particles, and it is not truly dangerous. Our grandparents often ran it straight to the garden through a simple pipe, and the fruit trees did not care where the water came from. Federal and many state regulations classify gray water differently from black water, which is toilet waste. For decades, local codes often lumped them together, requiring all household water to go to the municipal sewer system. In drought-prone states, that meant perfectly usable water was treated, chemically processed, and pumped back at enormous energy cost. Arizona led the way in legalizing simple gray water systems in 1994, and California followed. The trick our grandparents used, a simple three-way valve and a perforated pipe buried in the garden, is now legal in most Western states when done correctly. It can cut outdoor water use in half, and it costs under $30 to install. Number 19. The smokehouse. Every farm had one, a small wooden or stone structure where hams, bacon slabs, sausages, and fish hung from iron hooks above a smoldering fire of hickory or apple wood. Cold smoking at temperatures below 90 degrees preserved meat through chemical action, the smoke depositing antimicrobial compounds directly into the flesh. Your great-grandfather's smokehouse kept pork edible for a year without refrigeration. Building codes now require permits for any permanent outdoor structure. Fire codes restrict open burning in most counties. Some health departments have declared home-smoked meats a prohibited food for resale. But on your own property, for your own family, the practice remains legal in most jurisdictions. The technique is specific. You need a separate firebox connected by a pipe so the smoke cools before reaching the meat. You need hardwood, not softwood, which produces toxic resins. You need a thermometer. Your grandfather learned this from his father and could do it in his sleep. The knowledge very nearly died with his generation. Number 18. Foraging on public land. Second pattern break. In 1897, John Muir helped establish the National Forest System, partly to protect lands that ordinary Americans had foraged for generations. By 1950, families across Appalachia, the Ozarks, and the Pacific Northwest still gathered ramps, morels, pawpaws, hickory nuts, and blackberries from public forests as a matter of course. Then came the regulations, collection limits, permit requirements, designated zones. In some national parks, picking a single wildflower is technically illegal. The rules were designed for commercial foragers, but enforcement often swept up subsistence families who had gathered from those lands for 100 years. Your grandmother knew which plants were safe because she learned from her grandmother. That knowledge, which mushrooms, which berries, which roots, is not intuitive. It requires direct transmission from person to person. Where it survived, families eat better and cheaper. Most national forests allow personal use collection of up to 2 gallons per day of berries, nuts, and mushrooms without a permit. Read the specific regulations for your forest, then go. Before indoor plumbing reached rural America, the outhouse was standard issue. A properly managed privy, sited correctly and maintained with a covering of lime or ash after each use, is a functional sanitation system that produces no sewage, requires no water, and creates no water pollution. Your great-grandmother used one her entire life and never thought twice about it. The Humanure Handbook, written by Joseph Jenkins and now in its 4th edition, documents the science behind safe composting of human waste into pathogen-free garden compost through high-temperature thermophilic composting. The process, when done correctly, produces materials safer than municipal sewage sludge, which is often contaminated with pharmaceutical residues and industrial chemicals. Local health codes in most counties require connection to a municipal sewer or approved septic system and prohibit composting toilets without a specific permit. Many states now have permit pathways for approved systems. The underlying principle that human waste is a resource rather than a hazard is one your grandparents understood without any regulatory framework telling them so. Number 16. Backyard beekeeping. Honeybees need human help right now. Colony collapse disorder has wiped out approximately 30% of managed bee colonies every single year since 2006. The cause is complex, involving pesticides, habitat loss, parasites, and monoculture farming. Your grandfather kept bees with boxes he built from pine boards and tin roofing. He harvested honey in September, left enough for the colony to winter, and sold the surplus in mason jars from the roadside stand. No registration, no inspection, no permits required. Most cities now require registration of hive locations, minimum setback distances from property lines, and in some cases, neighbor notification or consent. These rules have made urban beekeeping complicated enough that many would-be keepers give up. Meanwhile, the bee population continues to collapse. The technique has not changed. Langstroth hives, smoker veil, and patience. What your grandfather knew in his bones about the rhythm of the hive, the sound of a healthy colony, the smell of propolis and wax, is available in every library in the country. Keeping 2 hives in your backyard is one of the most subversive acts of ecological restoration available to an ordinary American. Number 15. Milk straight from the cow. Third pattern break. Raw milk regulation is the clearest example of regulatory capture in American food history. In 1987, the FDA banned interstate sale of raw milk entirely. By 2000, over 20 states had effectively banned or severely restricted intrastate raw milk sales as well. The stated reason was pathogen risk. The actual driver was the dairy lobby, which had invested heavily in pasteurization infrastructure and needed to eliminate small-scale competition. Here is what the science actually shows. Pasteurization kills beneficial bacteria and enzymes along with harmful ones. Studies from Switzerland, Germany, and Finland consistently show that children raised on raw milk from known healthy cows have significantly lower rates of asthma and allergies than those drinking pasteurized milk. A 2015 study in the Journal of Allergy and Clinical Immunology found the effect was dramatic and consistent. Your grandmother milked her cow every morning and fed her children the milk within hours. The cow was healthy because she could see the cow. The risk was and is manageable with basic sanitation and animal health practices that any competent farmer knows. 31 states now allow some form of raw milk sale, often through herd share arrangements. The knowledge is worth having, even if the access is complicated. Beyond garden irrigation, your grandparents built ceramic filtration systems that turned roof-collected rainwater into drinking water. The slow sand filter is a technology dating to the 1820s. It uses layers of gravel, sand, and biological organisms to remove pathogens without chemicals or electricity. It was so effective that municipalities used it as the primary water treatment method until chlorination became standard in the 1920s. A properly built slow sand filter, constructed from 2 food-grade barrels and about $40 of materials, can process 50 gallons per day and produce water that meets or exceeds municipal standards for pathogens. Your grandfather built his from concrete and river sand. He never needed a water bill. Drinking water standards technically require chemical disinfection in municipal systems. Your private well on your private land, however, has no such requirement. The filter design is freely available from multiple engineering schools and NGOs that use it in international development contexts. It works, and it has always worked. Before mechanical refrigeration, ice was harvested from frozen ponds every January and stored in underground ice houses packed with sawdust as insulation. A properly built ice house, roughly 8 feet underground with thick sawdust packing, kept large blocks of ice solid from February through August. Your great-grandparents used this ice to preserve butter, cream, and meat through the summer. The technique requires a cold winter, a body of clean water, and labor. You cut 18-inch thick blocks with a crosscut saw, transport them by sled, and pack them tightly with sawdust from the nearest mill. Packed correctly, a 300-pound block loses only a few inches per month. The knowledge of icehouse construction is essentially gone from practical American memory. It exists in historical records, farmers' almanac archives, and a handful of living history museums. In a scenario where mechanical refrigeration fails, the ice cellar is the difference between preserving food and losing it. The technique itself has no regulatory barrier. Nobody banned ice. Number 12. Wood gasification for fuel. This one sounds like science fiction. It is not. During World War II, with gasoline rationed, thousands of European vehicles ran on wood gas, a mixture of hydrogen and carbon monoxide produced by heating wood in a low-oxygen environment. The gas was fed directly into the engine's carburetor. Trucks, tractors, and even some automobiles ran this way for years. Your grandfather's generation knew about this technology. Plans were published by the Federal Emergency Management Agency as recently as 1989 in a document called Construction of a Simplified Wood Gas Generator, which you can still download from their archive today. A vehicle modified to run on wood gas can travel approximately 1 mile per pound of hardwood. The modification involves attaching a gasifier unit, essentially a sealed combustion chamber with a filter system, to the air intake of a gasoline engine. It is mechanical. It is legal. It requires no special permits. And in a long-term grid-down scenario, the family with a wood lot and a gasifier keeps moving when everyone else is parked. Your grandfather understood self-sufficiency in ways we have mostly forgotten. Number 11. Herbs as medicine. Fourth pattern break. The American Medical Association lobbied aggressively throughout the early 20th century to discredit botanical medicine. The Flexner Report of 1910, funded by the Carnegie and Rockefeller Foundations, which also had significant investments in the pharmaceutical industry, resulted in the closure of the majority of American medical schools that taught herbal and natural medicine. Your grandmother kept a kitchen garden of medicinal plants that her community had used for generations. She made elderberry syrup for immune system support, yarrow to stop bleeding, plantain, the common lawnweed, used as a drawing poultice for splinters and stings, valerian root for sleep, and chamomile for digestive upset in children. None of these are magic. All of them have documented mechanisms of action that modern phytochemistry can explain. The FDA does not permit herbalists to make specific health claims, but it cannot make the plants illegal. Your grandmother did not make claims. She made tea, poultice, and tincture. Her community was healthier for it in ways that no single pharmaceutical product can fully replicate. Before licensed contractors, building permits, and inspections, Americans built their own homes and barns using a technique called the raising bee. The community gathered. The frame went up in a day. Everyone contributed what they knew, and everyone left fed. A family could have a solid timber frame home on the land within a single season using this method. Modern building codes require licensed contractors for virtually all structural work. Owner-builder permits exist in most states, but they are cumbersome and often require you to occupy the structure yourself for a minimum period before sale. The codes were written partly for safety and partly to protect the licensed contractor industry from competition. The skills have not disappeared. Timber framing schools operate across the country. Organizations like Natural Building Networks teach cob, straw bale, and earthen construction. Your grandfather built his own house, and it stood for 100 years. The most important regulation you face is your county's setback and minimum square footage requirements. Know those numbers. Everything else is technical knowledge that can be learned. In 1940, almost every American family with a yard kept chickens. Eggs were not bought. Eggs were collected each morning from 12 birds that also ate kitchen scraps, controlled insects, and produced manure for the garden. The system was closed, elegant, and cost almost nothing to maintain. By 1960, zoning laws in most American cities had banned livestock within city limits. The laws were driven by complaints about smell and noise, legitimate concerns in high-density areas, but applied with a broad brush that eventually made backyard chickens illegal in suburbs that had nothing like the density that would justify the rule. The urban chicken-keeping movement has reversed much of this. Over 150 American cities now explicitly permit small laying flocks of 3 to 6 hens with no roosters, usually with setback requirements from property lines. The eggs from hens fed kitchen scraps and allowed to range contain measurably higher levels of omega-3 fatty acids and vitamin D than commercial eggs. Your grandmother knew her chickens by name. You can too. Number 8. The springhouse. Running water from a hillside spring collected in a small stone or log structure maintains a temperature between 40 and 55 degrees Fahrenheit year-round without refrigeration. Your great-grandmother set her milk crocks, butter crocks, and leftover supper in that springhouse every evening. The temperature was more consistent than most modern refrigerators. Building a springhouse requires a spring, which not every property has. But in areas with springs, the technique works perfectly without electricity, permits, or maintenance costs beyond keeping the structure clean. The spring itself must be tested for purity, and any state agricultural extension office will do that free of charge. Health codes require refrigeration at or below 41 degrees Fahrenheit for commercial food storage. Your private springhouse serves your private family and has no such regulatory burden. The technique is free. The water is free. The cold is free. Your grandmother used it until she got a Frigidaire, and she always said the milk tasted better before. Boiling water bath canning, your grandmother's standard method for preserving tomatoes, pickles, jams, and fruit, is now officially restricted by the USDA to high-acid foods only. Low-acid foods like beans, corn, meat, and most vegetables are required to be pressure canned because only the higher temperatures of a pressure canner reliably destroy Clostridium botulinum spores. The problem is that your grandmother canned everything in a water bath for decades, and she killed no one. She did it with skill, judgment, and knowledge passed down from her mother. She understood which foods were acidic enough to be safe. She knew the signs of a bad seal. She tested every jar. This is not an argument against pressure canning. A pressure canner is worth owning. But the regulatory climate around canning has so frightened people that many have abandoned food preservation entirely, choosing instead to buy canned goods from commercial processors whose methods are far less subject to home inspection than anything your grandmother did in her spotless kitchen. Learn both methods. Use both. The knowledge belongs to you. Number 6. Hunting and trapping for the table. Before game management regulations, before licensing requirements, before mandatory hunter education courses, American families hunted and trapped because they needed to eat. Your great-grandfather ran a trap line in November that yielded mink, muskrat, beaver, and rabbits. The meat fed his family. The pelts paid for flour and salt. Nothing was wasted. Modern hunting and trapping regulations are extensive, often expensive, and vary dramatically by state. The underlying principle that wild animals are a public resource managed by the state is sound, but the licensing costs and permit requirements have made subsistence hunting inaccessible to many of the families who most need it. What has largely vanished is the knowledge. Field dressing a deer, preparing a muskrat, rendering fat from a beaver tail, knowing which cuts to dry and which to cook fresh. This is biological and nutritional knowledge of the highest order. It kept your grandfather's family fed through the Depression when the grocery store was not an option. Fifth pattern break. Hydraulic drilling companies, which emerged as the dominant well drilling industry in the mid-20th century, lobbied successfully in most states to require licensed contractors for any new well installation. The stated reason was aquifer protection and water quality. The actual effect was the elimination of the hand-dug well, a technology your grandfather and every grandfather before him used to provide clean water to his family without paying anyone. A properly hand-dug well, lined with stone or brick, cased to exclude surface water, and fitted with a hand pump, provides reliable, clean water from shallow aquifers that no drought can touch. The technique is labor-intensive, but not technically complex. It requires basic masonry skills and the knowledge to identify the water table, which in most regions is visible in the landscape if you know where to look. In a grid-down scenario, a drilled well with an electric pump produces nothing. Your grandfather's hand-dug well with a hand pump produces 100 gallons a day as long as your arm works. The well diggers who knew this trade are almost entirely gone. The knowledge survives in historical records and in communities, primarily Amish and Mennonite, that never stopped using it. Number 4. Solar dehydration. Before electric dehydrators, before freeze drying, before the snack aisle of the supermarket, your grandmother dried everything. Apple rings on a wooden rack in the September sun, beans spread on burlap, herbs bundled and hung from the barn rafters, jerky sliced thin and stretched on a wire frame with a fire smoldering underneath to keep the flies off. A simple solar dehydrator, a wooden box with a glass lid and a dark interior, can dry fruit and vegetables in 2 days using nothing but sunlight. The dried product stores at room temperature for 6 months to a year, depending on the food. Your grandmother's dried apple rings, packed in paper bags in the root cellar, lasted until February. There is no regulation against drying your own food. This is the most purely legal entry on this list. What there is forgetting. The knowledge of proper drying temperatures, the importance of blanching vegetables before drying, the signs of case hardening that trap moisture inside while the outside looks dry, this knowledge is almost gone from ordinary American households. It takes an afternoon to learn. It is worth a winter of food security. Adobe construction, walls made from a mixture of clay, sand, straw, and water, has been used in the American Southwest for over 1,000 years. The Pueblo people built multi-story structures from it that are still standing. Your great-grandparents in New Mexico and Arizona built with adobe as a matter of course. The walls stay cool in summer and warm in winter because of their thermal mass. They require no manufactured materials. They cost almost nothing. Modern building codes in most counties require certified structural engineering, minimum insulation R values, and approved materials lists. Adobe and cob construction does not meet standard R-value requirements. It works differently from insulation, relying on thermal lag rather than resistance. For that reason, it is prohibited under most residential building codes. Owner-built exemptions exist in some counties. New Mexico has a specific Adobe building code. Other states are beginning to recognize alternative building methods. But the default assumption of American building regulation is that you buy manufactured materials and hire licensed labor. Your great-grandmother picked up her building material from the ground. Prohibition ended in 1933, but home distillation of spirits remained and remains a federal felony in the United States with penalties of up to $10,000 and 5 years in prison. The regulation exists to protect federal excise tax revenue. It has nothing to do with safety. Your grandfather fermented apple cider into hard cider that kept through winter. He probably knew someone who ran a small still. The knowledge of fermentation, which is entirely legal, is the foundation of food preservation. Sauerkraut, kimchi, sourdough, vinegar, cheese, yogurt, kefir, beer, wine, and mead are all fermented foods that your grandmother made routinely. They require no special equipment. They are among the most nutritious forms of preserved food ever developed. Home brewing of beer and wine is legal at the federal level and in most states. Home distillation is not, but the fermentation knowledge that underlies everything, the understanding of wild yeast, bacterial cultures, and the transformation of raw food into preserved food is knowledge that belongs to your family and to every family that came before yours. Number 1. Total energy independence. This is not a single trick. It is a philosophy, and it is the one that connects everything else on this list. Your great-grandfather's farm ran on sunlight, wood, water, and animal labor. He grew his own fuel, his own food, his own medicine, and his own building materials. He was not poor, he was sovereign. He owed nothing to a utility company because utility companies did not exist yet. He owed nothing to a seed company because Monsanto did not exist yet. He owed nothing to a grocery chain because there was no grocery chain within 40 miles. The entire infrastructure of modern American dependency, the grid, the municipal water system, the commercial food supply, the pharmaceutical supply chain, was built within living memory and sold to us as progress. It is progress in many ways. But your grandfather knew something the generation that came after him forgot. A man who produces nothing is dependent on whoever produces everything. Every item on this list is a piece of that sovereignty. Rainwater and wells give you water independence. The smokehouse and the root cellar give you food security. The composting toilet and the gray water system close your waste loop. The wood gasifier and the solar panels cut your energy cord. The seed saving and the chicken flock and the kitchen garden and the foraging knowledge give you a food supply that no supply chain disruption can touch. None of this is fantasy. None of this is prepping paranoia. It is how human beings lived on this land for the entire length of American history before the last 60 years. Your grandparents knew all of it. We forgot it in a single generation because forgetting was profitable for someone else. Here is your challenge. Pick one, just one. Collect rainwater this week if it rains where you are. Plant a row of open pollinated seeds. Find a neighbor who keeps bees and ask them how they started. Buy a used pressure canner at a thrift store and learn to use it. Tell me in the comments which one you are trying first. Tell me if your grandparents did any of these, because I promise you somebody in your family tree knew every last trick on this list. That knowledge did not die. It just went quiet. It is time to start listening again.